I am going to get going, read the bios here. We are going to learn how to start a TNR program. And again, as I said, this session was sponsored by Lola, the rescued cat. This is where we're going to learn how to start or enhance a TNR program and create a positive impact in your community with guidance from 2 seasoned TNR professionals. Pat Dames is our first speaker. Pat lives in Austin, Texas. She is the founder and manager of TNR Texas. She's also a trapper with the city of Austin and Shadow Cats and has a long history of volunteering with many cat rescue groups around the country. Most of Pat's professional work has been in nonprofit management, with a focus on building relationships, marketing, and program development in the areas of public health, women's cancer support, equine therapy, and even the management of a nonprofit animal shelter. Pat lives with 3 cats, all of them rescues. And then I'm also going to introduce Bryan Kortis so that then they can just hand the screen straight over to Bryan. Bryan is the co-founder and national programs director for Neighborhood Cats, a leading community cat advocacy group with hands-on programs in New York City, New Jersey, and Maui. Currently, he and his wife, Susan Richmond, live in Hawaii and usually can be found trapping cats or releasing them after they've been neutered. In between stints with Neighborhood Cats, Bryan served as a grants manager for PetSmart Charities, overseeing more than $21 million in TNR and spay neuter projects. He has produced many of the leading educational materials on TNR, including award-winning books and videos. He's assisted numerous communities in setting up large-scale TNR programs and is a frequent presenter on community cat issues. Bryan has a BA from Cornell University and a JD from the University of California at Berkeley, and I believe he has presented his TNR certification workshop to over 2,200 people over the course of the last year to 15 months. So an incredible number of people are getting TNR certified through Bryan's educational programs with the TNR workshops.
Wonderful. Stacy, I'm so glad you did the poll questions first. It is so good to know that what the breakdown, especially the part of people in supportive communities, I loved that, and numbers of cats TNR'd. I consider this workshop not just for the very beginner, but it's either to enhance an existing program or start one up. So hopefully we'll meet those needs. I consider this should be a one-day program, so trying to squeeze it into about a half an hour. Wish me luck. So anyway, I want to tell you just a tiny bit about TNR Texas. It was a couple years ago. I just got tired of answering the same questions of, hey, a cat showed up in my backyard. It seems to be pregnant, or there, it's a mama cat and kittens or whatever. And just decided, wouldn't it be great to have one website where you can just go to find all the resources in your community? And so that's where it started out. And then we said, well, let's go ahead and add information in there on how to TNR. Let's go ahead and add information about what to do with injured cats. Let's add some resources on financial assistance. And then one of the later pages was how to start a TNR program. So if you end up going to that page, it's not our created work. We're linking to everything we can find that's out there. So a lot of links to Neighborhood Cats and many of the other organizations. So anyway, I'll refer to that ongoing because it's a great place to hit those links. I also just want to add that when I talk about feral cats, I truly mean feral cats. And I want to stress this as an important part when you're developing relationships in the community. There's an image we have of what a feral cat is, and it's pretty accurate. The problem is when we call ourselves a feral cat program and make a comment that's so broad, people forget that a lot of the cats out there were once owned and very loved and well taken care of cats. And so I try to avoid that unless I'm really talking about those who are untouchable, basically. So anyway, I throw that out there for your use also. All right, let's jump in. Okay, so that's not working. Let's see. Why am I not going to my next slide? Let's see. Oh, there we go. Okay, good. So starting out small. Not a bad thing. If you are one person and you've got a couple of traps and you just spay and neuter cats as you have funds available, you're making a difference. That's great. If you're wanting to do something more, I always recommend that do your research. Find out who else is doing what in your community. Google search it. search on Facebook, put in all these keywords: feral cat, cat colony, community cats, low cost spay and neuter, find out what's out there. That's how I developed that website. I just search a lot. And if you find another group that looks like they could use your help, maybe that's the way to go, partner with them. Um, at the very least, you can set up times to talk with them and say, because people, we all want to help each other. At least I hope that's the intent out there. And sitting down with them and saying, this is what we are visualizing that we'd like to be doing. How does that fit with what you're doing or your plans? How can we work together to maximize our impact? So the other part is, um, along with that search, become familiar with your local laws. What are your ordinances? Are they cat friendly? And I am so glad to see that so many of you have TNR friendly communities. I wish here in Texas we could say that. Our major cities are pretty good, but boy, we've got a long way to go in the rural communities. And so I have to work with people a lot on how to work around that, how to get buy-in from people who think that cats don't matter and it's all about your dogs, your hunting dogs and all. So that's a tough situation to be in, but you have to dance around a little more delicately when your animal control policies don't fit with what you want to do. So creating a proposal, if you have to go that route. I don't want to dwell on this too much, but I do want to stress a few points. Make it simple. If you're going to go talk to people and say, this is what we want to do, if you can limit it to 2 to 3 pages of basically bullets, easy to read, people will read it. One of my communities here asked me for help. They showed me what they presented. It was a 27-page document, and it had a lot of good stuff in it, but no one was going to take the time to read it. And so that's my big one piece of advice there. If you are trying to get buy-in, I'm a big favor of go see the mayor. The mayor is usually very interested in grassroots efforts of community involvement, things that make the community look good. And if you walk in saying, I'd like your help and your input, who do we need to talk to? Who do we need to bring into this? And they can often be very helpful. There's a lot of other points in here, but you know, your bullets would include what hasn't worked. Like for instance, catch and kill and withholding food are strategies that are used throughout Texas and probably a lot of other places still. And as much as we ask them, hey, can you name me one community where that's worked? It still happens. And so we have a lot of work to do. And if you're in that community, your proposal will make a big difference if you can get buy-in. All right. Uh, Positive benefits of a TNR program. I don't want to spend too much effort or content on this, but um, it's here. You know the results. You know, it saves lives. It's the only humane alternative. All right. I do want to stress that when you are talking to animal control officers, I have found the only way I get their buy-in is when I go in and I express my thoughts basically of saying, hey, I know how hard your work is. I know you care about animals and you have way too much on your plate. We would like to help you. We want to help you accomplish your goals and take some off your plate and work together on this. The buy-in works so much easier. The proposal I talked to you about, it was just criticizing what animal control had been doing, and I had to tell them, you need to write the whole thing over again. You're not going to get support when you start out just criticizing everything they're doing. So that's my 2 cents. Okay, this is basically the few things we're going to talk about. I put more in my slides because if you're like me, you go back later and you want things to trigger your mind, but I'm not going to touch on everything on the slides because I want to talk more on the things that really are important right now. Okay, have a plan. No matter how small you're starting out, have a plan. Define what is the need. I mean, is it just TNR a bunch of cats? Is it find fosters? Is it fundraising? Maybe people are already doing that and you've got vets, but you have no money to pay them, so you can't TNR any cats. So identify really what the real need is, what you want to see come out of this, determining the scope area. Some of the programs I've seen just don't define that, and all of a sudden they've got communities an hour away, contacting them. They can't meet the needs of their local community because maybe they have 3 trappers and 5 traps and one vet who will spay and neuter 5 cats a month. Okay, so be realistic on what you can accomplish. You can always expand it, but it's harder to make it smaller. Um, Identify team members and roles and anticipate challenges. This is, I think, one of the biggest things. So you've figured out you can get enough money to TNR the designated number of cats. But what happens when you get that cat you trap and you find out it's got a broken leg or it's very ill? Do you have a vet that will work with you? You can always do those quick fundraisers online. That works really good for those. And then what are you going to do with pregnant cats? What is your group's policy going to be? And if you need holding recovery space, a cat that did have a health problem and needs to be kept for an extra 2 weeks, do you have somebody that can do that? So anyway, just think about those things. It doesn't mean don't do a TNR program if you can't, but you'll be better prepared if you can give this some thought. Okay, and again, at different areas, you're going to have more resources. Veterinarians. Okay, as far as I'm concerned, veterinarians are probably going to be your most challenging aspect, and it will also probably be your greatest expense also. And so if you're lucky enough that you have a vet school nearby, that is a great resource. If you already have animal control that's working with some vets, they're used to working with feral cats, they're, very often ready and willing to jump in and take on more. The more clinics you can get, the better. Negotiate, of course, it's obvious, the lowest rates possible. A lot of programs use voucher programs, and that can work also. You need to decide what's working best and what your clinic or your vet that you're working with will go with. I love the trend now where a lot of areas are doing mass TNR events where maybe they're doing 100 cats in a day and once or twice a month. They put up a big tent or have a big building that they've been able to use, and you just get it done. They seem to be working really well. They usually set up in enough time in advance that you can fundraise for them, and makes it easy because most of those do cost something still, but sometimes funders or sponsors will come in. Okay, so you want to do what you can to make that veterinary clinic's job easier. They may not have really worked with feral cats before, and so there's a lot of resources online that you can present to them on what they need, protocols that have been established and work really well. They may need some help getting some of the supplies they need. If they're giving you a really good deal, they're going to say, hey, can you help me get some trap dividers, isolators, gloves, transfer cages, whatever they need. So at least on our page for start a TNR program, there's links to the groups that can give you more information on that. But they need to be willing to be feral friendly, and they need to know how to handle a feral cat. We've seen a lot of clinics where they didn't, and they've got a feral cat bouncing off the walls in their clinic, knocking everything over, and it's makes them less likely to want to work with you. Don't want that. All right. Money, 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 money. Okay, so depending on the size of your program, depends on how much you're going to need. And I listed some of the things you might have to cover: spay neuter fees, obviously, emergency vetting, equipment for the vets, equipment for yourself, traps, transportation fees, printing, and so for website fees. That's one that I have to eat every year. It's not fun. And you may want to talk to animal control. If you have a good relationship with animal control in your community, because you're helping them out, they may actually have some funds that aren't being used that they can dedicate to the program. So there's a lot of good ways to raise money. You'll be able to read these later. One of the things I found when I polled a lot of the people on my Facebook page, we're finding that garage sales have been really successful here in Texas, at least. We have a group that holds one about 3 times a year and raises around $3,000. So they are using social media so well. And they have a lot of volunteers that they recruited through online sources. And so each one of these people are promoting the events and getting items donated for the garage sales and all. And they're going to groups like nextdoor.com as well as the buy nothing groups that are pretty popular. So be creative. Some places you're going to want to do an art gallery, introduction and, you know, event, or you might have chili cook-offs. It really just depends on your community and what works. Grants are always good, and there are some grants out there that will be just can be obtained by people who are not 501c3s yet. So you can also look into those. All right, media coverage, always good. If you can do stories about a rescue or a volunteer, something that's unique, it's wonderful to get that extra coverage. And I like to stress that the best coverage, in my opinion, from years of marketing too, is when there's a face, when there's a story. If you're posting a picture of a cat that you've just rescued, that goes a lot farther than a cute cartoon or something because that face pulls in people. It does for me. All right. Traps. Don't have to talk too much on this. I do want to stress Neighborhood Cats is partnered with uh, Tomahawk now, and they have a great trap out. It's very much like the True Catch, and it's got some extra wonderful features. So if you haven't gotten traps and you're going to, make sure you check that one out also. It is a wonderful trap. So things you need to look at is, and the main issue I want to talk about here is if you're going to have a trap loan program. You may feel you don't want to charge a deposit or anything, but these are so expensive and people take it more seriously. If they can give you a check for whatever amount you designate. Most places are doing $75 to $100 check. Once they bring the trap back, they get their check back. So I highly encourage you do that. Determine if you're going to have a length of time, like 1 week, 4 days, whatever, but stick to it. If you don't have a lot of traps, you don't want to have all of them stuck out in the community where you don't have access to them. I also want to just throw in a little tip that we have found that's great. So if you've got to hold a cat for an extra day or two or longer, I love to zip tie or bungee 2 traps together. Usually I use bungee cords for a couple reasons. Gets me a little flexibility. You can open that and drop that middle door and lock them in on one side. The cat will always go to the darkest side. So you cover that. You can clean the litter box on the other end, and those little cardboard boxes that your small cans of cat food come in fit so nice in a trap. Anyway, that's a tip I've really appreciated over the years. Volunteers. I'm not in there. I've listed a lot of different things that you could use volunteers for. I love asking people, once I say this is our main need, we need people to be trained in TNR. We need people to do transport. But once you've got them, say, if you have other skills, I'd love to know more about what you do. You may find you have a grant writer, a graphic artist, a website designer. So anyway, check out your volunteers, have them share everything on social media also. The more volunteers you have, the more exposure you get, the more funds you get, and the more success, hopefully. All right. Training. You can find online trainings now, so you need to determine. But one of the key things I have found that really make a program well, you're always going to have a few seasoned trappers that you've worked with before that don't feel they need to go through the official training. And if they don't, very often they're doing things in ways that aren't consistent with what you're wanting to be done, and it's really hard to go back and correct those errors in the future. So I always say, I don't care how seasoned your trappers are, tell them you need them to go through the training so they will understand what everybody else is learning, if nothing else. But get them in there, get them trained also. I'll talk a little bit more on a success story of somebody else who does a good trapping program. Policies and procedures. I'm not going to go into much on this, but keep it simple. Just the less words that you can use, and just be very specific. Cats need to be dropped off by this time, picked up by this time, no more than 1 per trap, and so on. Just keep but have them, but keep them simple. and data. I know Brian's going to talk about that a good bit, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this, except that as much as you're comfortably able to track without making everybody crazy, track it. If you're just doing a presentation to your community stakeholders, even if you've only been doing this for 2 months and you can show them what you've done and even maybe how much you've spent, which hopefully isn't that much on the TNR of those animals, it will encourage them to give you more support. Grants, they're going to ask you for everything you've been doing, and it's really hard to pull it together when you're trying to do a grant at the last minute. So track, track, track. Okay. All right, I'm going to take a little breath here. Learning from others. This is, I think, one of the best things you can do to have success, whether you're enhancing an existing program or starting from scratch. Talk to others in similar communities. Find out what they've been doing that's been working, what hasn't. You can actually go onto so many of their, if you can find them through a Facebook search, perhaps you can go and send messages there. Hey, I'd love to have a conversation with you. Would you be willing? We're just starting out. I'd like to see, how we can work together, learn from each other. Send messages, do what you need to do, and seek input. I mean, Neighborhood Cats, Alley Cat Allies, all these groups out there have a lot of good information to help and can guide you in a direction to get what you need. Sometimes it can be financial, sometimes it's just training or, you know, veterinary. They may have, a lot of the groups have lists of clinics in your area that are feral friendly and will direct you to them. So don't hesitate to reach out and connect with others via social media. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some success stories that I have really loved. So Austin has a really great program. It wasn't always this so, but there was a period of time many years back that Austin Humane Society and Austin Animal Center, that is the county animal control, came together and they looked at a lot of the barriers. And so one of the barriers we had here was there were a lot of trappers and a lot of people willing to do that. And we had a lot of slots pre-COVID for spay and neuter, but people couldn't necessarily, because of their work schedule, be there at 8 a.m. to drop off a cat. And so they created the mobile mini. And this has been something we just love. It's a little storage room. Now they have, just in the last few months, had the grand opening of, now they have actually a little building, which is even better, where inside it's air conditioned. There are long shelves, rows and rows, where you store your cats. They've got cat food there. They've got all the paperwork there. So when you trap a cat, you can come drop it off in the afternoon of the day before, anytime until, the next morning at 8 a.m. or I believe they pick up at 10. So you have that much time to get your cats into that building. And then Austin Humane Society comes over, picks up the cats, takes them back, spays and neuters them, brings them back the next day around midday, and then you have any time between then and midnight basically to come pick up your cat. And so for people who are also working, it's a huge, huge benefit to have this. And I highly recommend it. San Antonio Feral Cat Coalition, another group that I've been really thrilled about with the things that they're doing. So they have a really good online TNR training program. And so a lot of people in other communities also have their trappers take that training. Anybody in the San Antonio area, though, that takes it can get a TNR spay neuter for $20, which is greatly reduced. They also have they have a cat crisis fund. That is wonderful. They've got a helpline. But one of the things they do that not many groups do is, if there is someone who isn't able to just borrow traps and trap their own cats, they have to bring in a trapper. That trapper gets a $20 stipend per cat. So that's an exciting change of what most people are able to do. And I want to put that out there. A lot of the trappers I know that have dropped out over time, one is from stress and burnout, which I'll talk about, but it's also, it's an expensive job, a volunteer job. And if you're developing a program and you have access to be able to do something along that line, I encourage you to look into that. I think it's it's a nice help to keep spirits up and people compensated, and so we're not all in the poorhouse. Feral Cat Coalition, San Diego, another really good one to look into, high volume clinic run by volunteers. Brian's going to be talking about the Feral Cat Initiative in New York. That was an amazing program, if you can imagine. And I've had so many people in dense urban communities contact me for how do we do that when it's not always the same cats, they're all over the place. How do I target? How do I, and so that was one of the best examples of a program like that. Operation Catnip in Gainesville, Florida. This is a model TNR clinic. They're very huge scale. And boy, so they do a voucher program. That's one. And it's all volunteer, 100% volunteer. And that includes veterinarians, vet students, anybody they can bring in. And they started in 1998, I believe it was, and they have done over 65,000 cats. And so it's definitely one, if you're looking at best practices, definitely give them a look, check them out. They're definitely worth looking at. Let's see, I know we have one small community here in Texas that, oh my gosh, it is just one of the worst areas for um, lack of support from animal control and from the community. If it's not a hunting dog, it doesn't matter. And they struggled. She used to bring, just got a van, would bring them down to Austin. Then when COVID hit, Austin didn't take in any cats from out of the area. They also, it was really cut back dramatically. And she started working hard with folks. And so she has, now she's doing like, 500 cats sometimes in a month. I mean, she is just doing an amazing turnaround just by partnering with others, talking to others. So I just go, if that's like one of the worst communities, if somebody like that can do it, just keep trying. She's also been able to bring in some folks from out of the area who do these what we call mash style events. And I love that, with a big tent and do 100 in a day, and then they're out of town. And so if you have access to look into those, definitely consider it. It's sometimes a lot easier to do one event every 2 months. So anyway, it's definitely an option to look at. We have here Shadow Cats in this community. Shadow Cats was just a group. What I love about them is they transitioned as the need, as there was the need. So it started out with a woman just going out and trapping cats, and little by little it grew into more because she ended up keeping a lot of the cats that couldn't be released for health reasons, and ended up with a sanctuary, but never lost her love for TNR and community cats. And so now what the organization does is they raise money through a One Life Fund, which they distribute back into local TNR efforts around the state. And so a lot of people are contacting them to get help, whether they're a large group or whether it's an individual that just had 6 cats show up, or their neighbor next door moved away and left 15, and they're trying to get them spayed and neutered, and they can get help from the One Life Fund. They do a lot for TNR. And so again, just adapting to what the needs are. So that was another group that I am very fond of. So again, talk to the other groups around. You're going to find little tricks. Now, the one thing I've found that everybody I'm talking to lately that is doing great with raising money and getting volunteers in, the one thing they're doing is social media. This is not something we had, say, 20 years ago to the extent we do now, but through nextdoor.com, Facebook, Buy Nothing groups, there's so many ways to put your message out there and say, hey, we've got a group, we're doing this. We're looking for volunteers, and give them a few ideas, give them options, whether it's learning how to TNR, transporting, helping us with our website, whatever, we'd love to have you join us. Now, the other thing that happens is each one of those people have a whole social network too. And so as they begin to put their messages out there, you draw more people, you draw more funds, you get more things donated to you that you need, including money for those emergency medical situations that pop up. So social media, and I love nextdoor.com. I think it's a great one for this. Neighbors helping neighbors. I think people are more likely to do that. So yeah, definitely look into those. All right. Okay. So program challenges. Again, the number one thing we all know is the cost and lack of access. So if you can address what that would look like in your community, whether you're enhancing a program or starting out, how can you address both of those issues? If you can address both of those, then you're going to be able to make a difference. So another couple programs I know what they did is they managed to get a van donated, or somebody just lets them use it, but they're able to pick up the cats. Again, people that work, it's really hard to get a cat dropped, or a couple of cats dropped off at a particular time and pick up at a particular time. So having somebody else that can do that is a big plus. So again, look at your community, your challenges, your needs, see what's going to work best for you. Again, we talked about the buy-in of key community stakeholders, and that's just people of influence in your community, not just animal control and the mayor and council and all that, but it's everybody, and whatever you can do. I also want to say that when you do your proposals, highlight the things that are most important to your audience. And so if you're talking to the mayor, the priorities are going to look a little different than when you're talking to your animal control department. They're going to salivate and be so happy when you say the programs that have instituted a similar program saw a dramatic decrease in their budget costs. That we save you money. You don't have to be spending a lot of time taking nuisance calls. You don't need to have your staff spending a lot of time going out looking for these nuisance cats, then trapping them, then bringing them in, caring for them for the hold period, and then spending the expense of euthanizing them. And it's hard on those staff members too. So when you're talking about the cost saving and community image is going to improve, that's what they want to hear. So be aware of your audience, what message is important to them. And again, just you're there to help what's already in place. I think that finding enough people to commit to the program can be difficult, especially if you're scaring them away. So when somebody comes to volunteer, listening to them carefully about what they can do is better than just, oh, thank God you're here. You have so many gifts. Can you go out and trap 15 cats this weekend? Can do that. And by the way, I need your help getting ready for this garage sale. So anyway, be aware of, don't scare them away. Dealing with opposition to TNR and community cats. That's a hard one for everybody when you've got trollers that are coming onto your Facebook page or contacting you directly, or at a community event saying that all feral cats should be eliminated because they're hurting the environment, they're killing the birds. And so there's a lot of information on various websites out there. So anyway, Google that if you need to learn a little bit more and get versed on how to respond to those. There's a lot of good data behind there, especially I think Alley Cat Allies has done a great job. Okay, COVID has changed things, and I'm hoping it's over soon so we can get back to getting more cats TNR'd, but we're doing okay right now. And doing too much too soon. You're so excited about starting something. Maybe you got your 501c3 status, but just pace yourself. And I will say also, if you're working on a 501c3 status, you can find another nonprofit often that you can work under for donations, and it just filters through them. And so that's another thing to look into so you can start getting donations. TNR cats with special needs, we talked about that. That's a big one. And the emotional impact. Burnout is real. We can't help them all. The emotional toll is tough. So being aware of that with your people, check in with your volunteers often, just saying, hey, how are you doing? Is this too hard? Does it feel good? Just check in. And then be creative. Think outside the box. The more you step outside the box, the more you start crazy things like Operation Catnip and, paying for trapping and such. And my last slide is just helpful links. And on TNR Texas, again, I don't make any money off of it. I don't do it. It's not a business. It's just my volunteer effort to provide information out there. And so, but we just try to link to everything that's already out there that we think is relevant. So it's not what we create. So if you're looking for a lot of even neighborhood cats links that'll help you, you know, our website's going to have a lot of that. And so I just listed a few of the organizations that have already been mentioned that are key ones to check. And other than that, I know I talked a lot and I think I'm right on time almost. So yay for me. And yeah, thank you. Good luck. TNR lots of cats and, you know, reach out for help when you need it.
All right, well, thank you, everybody. There's a lot of great information from Pat. And what I want to talk about is, it's important to have the necessary resources, a lot of which Pat went over, but it's equally important, especially in the beginning of a program, how you use those resources. And you want to be doing everything for the cats that you're dealing with, the faces that are right in front of you. But at the same time, you should be having the goal of demonstrating the effectiveness of trap neuter return to the community that you're working in. So you're always pursuing both of those, doing the best you can for the cats, but also realizing, especially in the beginning, that you need to show that what you're doing is working. So now that Pat has gone over the nuts and bolts, I wanted to give you a real life example of what starting a program can look like by talking about how we at Neighborhood Cats, how we started. And hopefully we can pull some lessons from that, which will be helpful for you. So we started in 1999 in New York City, and there were 3 volunteers, 2 of them in this photo, that's me in the middle, and co-founder Ruth Sharp is on your right. And it was just the 3 of us. We lived on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. We paid for everything ourselves in the very beginning. And really an important thing for those of you who, are facing considerable obstacles at this point is, well, when we started, there were no spay neuter programs for feral or stray cats in New York City. And the cat euthanasia rate at the city shelters, was quite high. I don't remember what it was exactly, but it was well over 50%. And it may have been more like in the 80s or 90s. So it was pretty grim situation when we first started. But today, I can't say fast forward since it's been 22 years. But today we administer a citywide TNR program that's endorsed by the New York City government. There are multiple spay neuter options available for caretakers, including some that are free. At the moment, because of the pandemic, a lot of these resources are currently limited, but there still are resources out there, and hopefully these will return at some point. And the live release rate for cats at animal care centers of New York City is over 90%. So we've come quite a long way in this period of time. So how did we start? Well, we started with one colony, and it was a block near where I lived. Again, this is the Upper West Side, and you're seeing a couple of the cats. The trick question in this photo is, where's the second cat? So I'll tell you at the end. But that's how the 3 of us met, the 3 founders, was we all kind of came upon this colony of 30 cats and kittens that were living in the interior courtyards of a city block. And we were looking for ways to help, and we found each other. And at first, I had never heard of TNR, and I didn't even know what a feral cat was. So, our instinct at first was that these guys should all be in homes. So we hooked up with a rescuer who also thought they should all be in homes. And we quickly trapped like half a dozen of them and brought them to somebody's apartment, and then we learned the meaning of feral. And it became, one ruined couch and a destroyed bathroom later. We learned that these guys are not adoptable, and this was not going to be a viable solution. So then we learned about trap, neuter, return, and the idea, well, fix them and put them back. So we decided, I was skeptical myself, would this work in a kind of dense urban environment? But we really lacking any other, we were not going to trap them and ship them off to the city shelter to be euthanized. So we decided that we should give it a try. In the course of doing this, we developed relationships with all the store owners on the block, with all the superintendents of the many buildings, with doormen. We talked to residents, basically anybody we could find that interacted with the cats. We wanted to get historical information about when did the cats come and who fed them and where were they, all the kind of basic stuff you do when you're scouting a trap, neuter, return project. For veterinarians, we had two ways that we got the cats fixed. One was that we were lucky. There was a veterinarian who had an office right across the street from this block, and he agreed to do some, not all. And otherwise, what we would do is we would look for veterinarians who had just opened their clinics, and they could be anywhere in the city as long as we could drive there. And we found that veterinary clinics that had just opened were generally happy for any business, including ours, and would give us a pretty reasonable rate. So this became our, what, in retrospect, we weren't thinking this way at the time, but in retrospect, this first colony became our, what I call, model colony. So we got 100% of the cats spayed and neutered. It took some time. It took over 8 months, and there was one cat that actually took closer to 7 years. Grandma, we called her, for a good reason. But 99% of the cats were fixed within 8 months. We learned not to try to socialize feral kittens and find them homes, because we did that, and it took a lot of time, and it took time away from managing the cats outdoors, time away from trapping, and it was very resource intensive to find them homes. So we did remove a lot of the kittens and tame them and find them homes, but we decided that was not going to be something we did again. We also removed, but by removing the friendly cats and kittens, including some that were young enough that they were easily socialized, by the time we finished sterilizing the colony after 8 months, we already had a 50% reduction in the size of this colony. Oh, I didn't tell you, let me go back one slide. So the second cat is up on the fire escape. He's a gray cat up on the upper left of the slide, in case anybody didn't spot that. So the model colony was successful. We, as I say, the colony size dropped from approximately 30 to about 12 within 1 year. And nuisance complaints had gone way down. And there were obviously far fewer kittens. There was just grandma would have a litter now and then that we would have to quickly remove and find homes for. But basically, at that point, we were convinced that actually this can work in somewhere like Manhattan. And better neighbors now, the cats were, and a lot fewer of them, a lot of cats in homes. And throughout this process, which is one thing I would really emphasize to you, we documented everything. We took photographs of all the cats. We kept records of everything that we did. We, the cats' names, descriptions, outcomes. So we could at any moment tell you exactly what we'd been doing with and what happened to each of these 30 cats. And that documentation turned out to be really important in the beginning for one very practical reason. This has got us a $2,500 grant from a local group that was interested in our work. And by being able to actually show them and not just tell them what we did through photographs and data, that's what got us the funding, which allowed us to, accelerate the fixing of the cats and paying for the vet fees and all that. So it was a success. And the thing I want to emphasize about this is, stepping back from our New York City experience, is the idea of targeting. And what we did without realizing it was what I called colony level targeting. So if you have 5 surgeries available to you, and you're looking at, as in this graphic, 5 colonies of 5 cats each, right? So a lot of times, and people will think like, all right, I've got 5 surgeries, 5 colonies, let me do this way and just fix 1 cat in each colony. That seems like the fairest approach, right? The problem is that you only achieve a 20% sterilization rate in each particular colony, and that's not going to do anything significant in terms of reducing the reproduction of the cats, because the other 4 are still intact and will still continue to have kittens. It's not going to eliminate to a major degree any nuisance, any yowling in the middle of the night or spraying or the things that neighbors may be having a problem with. It's helped that individual cat, but it hasn't helped the whole situation. And remember what I said in the beginning is you need to focus on the cats in front of you, but you also need to constantly be proving yourself. And you're not going to prove TNR works if you go about it this way. But on the other hand, if you said, I'm going to use all 5 of my surgeries to get 1 colony 100% fixed, now you can demonstrate success. Now that colony will not reproduce. Now there will be dramatically less complaints about the cats, and you'll be able to leverage that like we did to get more money, to get more support, to be able to expand further and get the 20, the resources you need to get those 20 other cats fixed. Whereas if you had done the same number of surgeries the other way, you would not have anything that you could use to push further ahead. So once we got that first colony done, the word spread pretty quickly throughout the neighborhood about our project. It was just total word of mouth. If there was social media back then, we certainly didn't know how to use it. So it was all neighbors talking to neighbors. And the thing was, there was just a street cat, extreme street cat overpopulation in New York City at that time, and including in Manhattan, in the residential areas like the Upper West Side. And almost every block had a colony of cats in the backyard. So when they heard that, things were a lot better over on the block we were working on, well, the next block over wanted to do it. So that led to more and more demand for our time. And so we went, the first thing we thought was, well, let's fix the colony across the street from our model colony, because if there was going to be cats moving in, especially as the population in the original colony went down, they were most likely going to come from across the street. So we went and fixed 20, 25 cats on the next block over. And then again, as we heard, we didn't, we weren't thinking, let's just do the Upper West Side. We were thinking that's where we lived, and it was convenient for us. Everybody else had, all the founders had other jobs at that point. But we ended up fixing the colony across the street and then working on other blocks of the neighborhood. Throughout this time, we were constantly recruiting people who were feeding, other caretakers, other residents, and we would try to get them involved as much as we possibly could so that all the work was not landing on us. And that turned out to be an important thing to do as well, was not to be three people who would do everything, but to always start the conversation with, well, what can you contribute? And some people can contribute more or less, but so a big problem in New York City is people live in apartments and they don't have places to hold the cats during the trapping or after the surgery. So we would task people who wanted our help for figuring that out, for talking to their superintendent, for talking to their landlord, for getting permission to use the basement, or finding a vacant store, or whatever it was to solve that problem. And they did. They pretty much always found a way to get it done. We worked in a local park on the Upper West Side. There were several colonies spread out over a couple of miles, 65 cats altogether. We got 100% sterilization. We built up a very strong network of caretakers who fed these guys and took long walks in the parks in the morning to go to their colonies. So they became our eyes and ears. When new cats would show up, we would be alerted right away. This also had the benefit of getting the government involved. The New York City Parks Department, of course, we had to have their permission, and then we also used a facility on park grounds to hold the cats after they were trapped. And actually, after 15 years, this population of cats was reduced to just one, and that was just from the cats getting old, and some of them ended up getting adopted, and many of them actually just died of old age. We did work in a huge local parking lot that held thousands of cars every day down near the Hudson River. It was used for commuter parking. So we went in there, and again, pretty much kept to our approach of sticking with the one's location until we got as close to 100% of the cats at that spot fixed as possible. We continued to get participation from whoever was located or whoever had originally notified us of assistance, who requested assistance. So this is, a kind of a general schematic of after 2.5 years of doing this on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. That's where all the pins are located. We'd fixed almost every colony we'd heard of. And when I look back at it now, what I realized we did without knowing it was we went from our first model colony to creating a model community. So that stretch you see of, down near the bottom of where the pins are, all the way up to, through Riverside Park, through 110th Street or so, was, well over 90% sterilization at least. And there were very, very few kittens being born there. And what happened was we went to animal care and control, as I'll talk about in a little bit, to start to gain support. And the first thing they did, and we told them we'd been working on the Upper West Side, and they looked up the intake numbers for that zip code, and the stray cat intake was down by 73% as compared to the rest of the city, where intake had actually been slightly rising. So they were sold immediately on this being an effective approach. Now, they didn't know targeting. We accidentally came upon it, but that's what was necessary to get these kinds of results. So if you were only doing colony level targeting, which I shouldn't say only, but if you're doing colony level targeting and you're getting 100% of the cats fixed at that site, but you're not doing community level targeting like we did here on the Upper West Side, then this is kind of what it looks like graphically, right? You've got these 100% fixed colonies scattered throughout the city. That's great for those colonies, and it's a great start to have these, model colonies, but there's too spread out in terms of creating an entire neighborhood, entire zip code, an entire community that is going to give you that kind of 3/4, 75% drop in intake. In order to get that, you have to do this, which is the same number of surgeries, same number of cats. So you're not helping any fewer, but you're doing it in a strategic way that's going to get you those dramatic impacts. And again, that's what lets you leverage those results into getting more resources. And that's what happened with us. So, like I said, we went to New York City Animal Control, and they were immediately impressed with this, and right away wanted to start like, how can we help? How can we grow our city's TNR services? So the first thing we did was we engaged them in a pilot project so that they could see it hands-on, so there was no mystery to it. We worked together to select, we gave them a list of eligible colonies, and they allowed them to select them. Neighborhood cats did the trapping. Animal control did the transport, the spay neuter, and held the cats. And so that project went very smoothly, very well. They implemented a policy of notifying us whenever ear-tipped cats were turned into the shelter. So that was a big draw for caretakers to get their cats fixed and to have them tipped, because they knew if they ever ended up in the city shelter, there was a good chance that if they were part of our network, they would find out and be able to reclaim the cats, which dozens of them did in those first couple of years. We also lobbied other agencies for services. The ASPCA is headquartered in Manhattan, in New York City. So they were a very logical organization to go to and say, hey, this is what we're doing, here's the results, this is the support we've built so far. Is there some way we can partner? It didn't start out with free spay neuter for community cats, but it ended up there within a couple of years. So first it started out with hosting workshops and trying to solve some of the smaller problems like holding space. But eventually they just went really big and started offering free feral cat spay neuter on their mobile clinics, as you can see here. So that was a huge breakthrough. So then, instead of having to trap 2-3 cats at a time and scramble around looking for private veterinarians who would squeeze them in at a low cost, now we could schedule a van and do 25 cats at a time. So that was a big leap forward. I mentioned that animal control started doing ear-tip cats alerts, and we started partnering with rescue groups to take on the adoptable cats that we came upon, so that we could get them out of the colonies, but not divert our own time from working, on the street. We also prioritized high-profile projects, ones we felt that would have a disproportionately high impact in terms of spreading awareness, in terms of again demonstrating. Again, I keep going back to my first principle, which is you're helping the cats in front of you, but you're also, part of your mission is to show everybody that this is a good idea. And so we did a colony at a hospital, a college campus, at a community center, places that people in the area would hear about and know, and hear from people that they knew and they trusted that this was something that was effective. We also prioritize, and when I say prioritize, I mean, of course we're getting flooded with calls for help. So, first come, first serve is like the worst way you could possibly go about this, because there's nothing strategic about that. It just becomes random. And like I say, you can only help so many cats. You only have so many resources at any one time. So you want to use them to not just help those cats, but to help your program. So if we got a call from a government agency, it went to the top of the list. One of them was the Fresh Kills landfill, with the Department of Sanitation, and you can see the kitty sitting on the seat of this huge bulldozer. And that was the dump for New York City, but they closed it. But there were still 55 cats living on the grounds and being fed by the skeleton crew that was still there. So we went out, and again, over the course of a week, we probably got I think we got 50 out of the 55 of them fixed, and then we came back and got to 100%. Eventually, that colony went down to 11, and when the entire landfill was shut and there wasn't even a skeleton crew, we moved the last guys to a farm upstate. So that was a nice happy ending. We worked at the New York Police Department's pistol firing range, which is kind of, you wouldn't expect to find a feral cat colony there, but there was quite a large one. We worked down at the Brooklyn Bridge with the Department of Transportation, all over the city with the Parks Department. We even did a project at the medical examiner's office where they had a whole bunch of cats that they needed help with. And in going about doing it this way, we were able to build support, build political support. That was the ultimate goal, is we wanted the city we wanted their approval, and we wanted it eventually to be official. And the way to do that was to, again, show them firsthand, this is what it is and this is how it works. And eventually the New York City Council did pass a law stating that trap, neuter, return is the preferred approach to community cat management in New York City. One of the government projects we did was on Rikers Island, which is the largest jail in the country. It's 440 acres. There were over 300 free roaming cats there. We built a local animal welfare coalition to address this, since it was way too large a project for one, but the ASPCA and animal care centers contributed mobile spay neuter clinics to go onto the island. We worked and trained multiple small groups who had popped up by then on how to do this kind of trapping and to do what we call mass trapping, which is when you trap an entire colony in one day. Got a lot of local media, the Times, the Daily News, all the TV stations. It even got some national attention. And what this ended up doing was it just opened the floodgates for awareness for TNR throughout New York City. And then there was no turning back at that point. It was firmly established, and it was a matter of now managing the growing demand. So one of the ways we managed the growing demand was to just start training a lot of other people. And Pat had mentioned this as one thing that is a good idea to do, and we totally agree. We would give in-person workshops that were hosted by, you can see we were in the ASPCA's boardroom, which was very nice. And what we did was we created a certification system where, in order to access free spay neuter from the ASPCA or our trap bank, and to get or what we call TNR coaches, which are experienced people who come out and assist in your first trapping, you had to be certified. And the reason for that was because without the certification, a lot of resources were getting wasted. The ASPCA somebody would book the van for 20 cats and they'd show up with 9. And we found that with training, those numbers greatly improved and the waste was substantially reduced. These workshops also gave rise to other New York City nonprofits that worked in their neighborhoods, similar to what Neighborhood Cats had done on the Upper West Side. We opened trap banks. That's something that people are not going to do if they're doing. I like to say that a successful community TNR program is evidenced by individuals who are not animal welfare people, who just want to address the problem in their backyard or their place of work, and they're one and done. They fix the cats, that's it. They're not going to buy a lot of traps, so you need to provide them for them. And there were a couple of our policies there. We we kept it to, at first we would make appointments, and then we realized what an incredible waste of our time that was. So we have the trap bank for 1 or 2 hours on a weekend, and that's when everybody comes and picks them up or drops them off. And don't forget the trap dividers. Another way to keep the program growing and spreading and vibrant is to do things like we did winter shelter giveaways. We do that now, where we found somebody who mass manufactures them. He gets fish boxes and turns them into cat winter shelters, and we're able to buy them in bulk and pass them along at cost, as opposed to be very difficult for people to just get 1 or 2. Straw food giveaways, these kinds of things will help to build our caretaker network. And of course, as we expanded and as we grew, our support services increased. So we, like I said, we did TNR coaches, we funding for extra medical care. There's an online discussion group, all these other things. The email network's really important. And in this way, there's always somebody, like the hotline that Pat had mentioned. There's always somebody, nobody's alone doing this work. Cat stats, I want to mention briefly, we soon found that the amount of data we were getting in terms of colonies was way too much for us to keep track of without spending all day on it. So we developed an automated system where caretakers log into a website and they enter their own colony data, like number of cats, when you started, how many cats are there now, where's your location, what's your contact information. And there's a version of that now. So all those circles you're seeing with the numbers, so that like in the middle of Brooklyn, 725. That means in that section of Brooklyn, we have 725 registered colonies. And if you zoom into the map down to the street level, you'll be able to see where each individual colony is and the information associated with that. We found that has been, we started off with a cruder version of this, and now it's more sophisticated, and it's been an enormous help in terms of program management and grant funding and just being able to produce data. If you're interested in this program, go to catstats.org. It's a free program. All you have to do is use it. Okay, so lastly, let me say that if you need advice on getting your program up and running or enhancing it, that's definitely part of what we do at Neighborhood Cats. And so you're more than welcome to reach out to myself. And Pat, do you want repeat your email, because Pat is also quite willing to give advice on this kind of thing.
There was a question about your Excel spreadsheets, and if you could talk a little bit more about how you utilize them for tracking, or is there a place where you can share your templates?
I don't really have anything like that right now, but we have done it before. Google Docs, various other sources. Sometimes if people can't do that, we try to make it as simple as possible. Sometimes it's just a Excel spreadsheet that I would go in and resave each night, so it can't be lost. But with a lot of columns where somebody can just check. So I would have is, some places it might be location, it might be, everything we've got. So you could just go through and check. So if we were mainly targeting like 4 or 5 neighborhoods, we might list those out. But it's really just, the location, date, number of cats, male, female, pregnant. If we had that information, kittens, and just kind of going through, and then number actually TNR, because a lot of times if it's kittens and all, that's not going to happen. But as much as we could do, an Excel spreadsheet will work fine if you just put all those columns in there and make it so simple where all they have to do is put an X or a number in a slot. That's basically it.
All right. So a couple questions for you. When you started out doing your trapping, were you microchipping the cats? And is that a standard protocol that you utilize today?
We were not microchipping the cats. And I would say the reason for that there were a couple of reasons. One was expense. It was a lot more expensive back then. They didn't have $5 chips and free registries. And even more importantly than that, there was no point in having a chip because there was no organized system for scanning them and contacting people. And what we found was by keeping track of where the cats came from, that if a cat was trapped in one location, it was a pretty good bet that they came from that location, being very territorial. Nowadays, of course, things are a lot different. And like here in Maui, the Maui Humane Society microchips all the cats. And I think they found it to be quite useful. It allows you to see patterns in what's happening with the cats. There's an abandonment issue here, and this helps evidence it. Sometimes cats end up TNR'd in one colony who came from another one, and you're able to contact. Sometimes cats are lost. They become friendly and are pets. So I think given the cost now, if your program can afford it, then it's a very good idea.
And I have a couple more questions. It's great to see you, Bryan, out there. Bryan came in off the beach. We just unmute you and then we'll be perfect. And so we have a question. In your trap bank, do you provide a how-to sheet or do you worry about people not using the traps correctly?
Well, I'll answer for us. In order to borrow traps from us, you have to have completed the TNR certification training, and that training is pretty thorough about how to use the traps. So we don't have an info sheet, although not a bad idea.
Pat, you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, a lot of the trap banks we've used, we have somebody meeting them there, and we're just showing them how to use it in 10 minutes. Because I will tell you that first time I had to try to figure out how to make that little piece of metal go in the right place. It took a while, took a few tries. So a little hands-on is real helpful, but we don't have the luxury. So we actually meet with them and let them go for it.
And this is our last question of the night. So we have a full weekend. Everybody's going to need to go get their beauty sleep. But this is about the vacuum effect. So sometimes when you're working on a colony, Bryan, you talked about the colony that you have, in the upper west side, east side. And, as they naturally die off and the colony gets smaller and smaller, you didn't necessarily see a vacuum effect with that situation, but that when we do trap and euthanize, we talk about the vacuum effect playing a role. So why do we not have a vacuum effect when our TNR'd colonies sort of age out?
Well, basically, if you're able to control the food source, the size of the food source. So if you start off with a 20 cat colony, 8 years later, it's a 7 cat colony, and you've reduced the amount of food available from 20 to 7, you haven't created a vacuum. But if you're in a location where you can't control the size of the food source, like let's say, behind a supermarket, where the cats are eating out of the dumpster, or maybe people aren't reducing the amount of food that's available, then you will have a vacuum effect with trap, neuter, return, unless you do the community level targeting that I was talking about, and you don't just fix the colony on one block. But that's the thing, we didn't get a vacuum effect down the Upper West Side because we fixed all the colonies around. There was nobody there were no cats to migrate. The only cats that could replenish the feral population would have been abandoned friendly cats, and we trained caretakers to get them as soon as they showed up and remove them. So you had the same experience in Newburyport, Massachusetts, which was the first real mass trap, neuter, community level targeting that went on in this country, where all the cats on the riverfront were spayed and neutered, not just one restaurant or 2 restaurants, but every single one. So the vacuum effect is mainly driven by feral cat migration, and if all the cat colonies are shrinking in size at the same time, you eliminate that migration. But if you only do one TNR colony and it's surrounded by a bunch that are not TNR'd, you will get the vacuum effect.
Can I add a little something? Good. Okay, so I've also found that if a colony is obliterated in a very short time, to put out poison and kill everyone, I have seen that when it's a sudden elimination of all, the vacuum effect is very clear. It comes in. But like Bryan was saying, when it's reducing gradually and you're adjusting it, there's still that those cats know. Like I said, it was described as me as the cats make a scent around there. And when others smell that but know there's not actual cats there, they will come in more. So anyway, the gradual, I agree, it just kind of controls itself until it's pretty much gone. But unfortunately, the poisonings happen a lot in Texas, and we've seen that a lot. And they fill right up again.